Hey guys. So today is a day I chose for reflection. And when I chose today for reflection, I wanted specifically to focus on my solar plexus. And the reason why I chose my solar plexus is because this is the seat of our confidence, our intuition, and our energy source, our life force. So the reason the solar plexus is so important to me this week is because I'm reflecting on the past week, the battles that I fought within myself. It wasn't that I was battling against my confidence, it was more along the lines I was battling for my confidence. I am confident. However, the past voices, the past hauntings, were trying to unseat me from my confidence, trying to throw me back off the horse. I have to look back and see exactly where the wounds are still. Like maybe healing, but still open. And this is where we start to do shadow work. So over the past week, whenever a thought would come that would try to unseat me from my confidence, I would push it away. The physics tells us that which we push will come back. It's a pendulum, right? You push the pendulum this way, it swings back. It isn't until we transmute that energy, deal with that energy, and learn from that energy that when it comes back, it is different. Now, it is not push. Now it is receive. Okay? So, specifically, it wasn't just my confidence, but it was also my intuition. Okay? So, most of my life, I ignored my intuition. I blamed it on trauma. I blamed it on fear. I blamed it on whatever else I could possibly blame it on. And it got to a point where I just didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself at all. Until one day. Till one day, I finally listened. And then what followed was a giant train wreck. And I blamed my intuition. Now, I want to re examine this. And I want to show you the process of transmuting a particular energy. Okay? So, this energy of not trusting the self, not trusting that gut feeling you get when you know something is wrong, or even that feeling in your chest. There's a difference between anxiety and intuition, right? So anxiety can make alarm signals go off in our head when there's absolutely nothing wrong. And that's what my mind was telling me. This is just anxiety. This is just anxiety. So I would take in that energy and I would twist it to fit into that anxiety bubble. Okay. Let me give you a particular example. I was in a relationship with someone who had no filter, and it was not necessarily a bad thing because it taught me a very huge lesson. And this is something that I want you to understand. Okay. If you are walking down the street and you have two people that walk by and they're having a conversation and you hear a slight portion of their conversation and it triggers something inside of your mind, it could be a negative thought or it could be a positive thing that uplifts your spirits. Okay. Now, if that person that walks by says something that triggers a lowering of your vibrations, they have now changed you in some way. This is what I want to talk about. The triggers. Okay? When we go through trauma, and I'm going to take this from a psychological perspective, okay? When we go through trauma, we have absolutely no understanding of how much information our brain is taking in from the surrounding area. okay? Every single bit of data that your brain takes in the moment, whether you are paying attention to it or not, can create a trigger that leads you right back to that situation. And you are back in the past, feeling the emotions, feeling the trauma. And I am talking about all the way to a specific bird call. This is how much data our brain processes. There could be a particular bird in the background, say it's a crow, and this crow is cawing very loudly while this traumatic event is happening. All of a sudden, now every time you hear a crow, you have no idea why, but you have anxiety. This is how triggers work, okay? It could be a name. It could be a smell. It could be, for me, the sound of a child crying was a trigger. And it wasn't until I started to pay attention to when or what or who created those triggers that led me back to that feeling that I was able to start learning how to change the programming. Because that's exactly what it is. Data leads to programming. This is not always conscious. It is something that you don't even know, especially if trauma happened before you even remember. This is especially important because when we are little, from the ages of 0 to 7, trauma that happens in this period of time, you're downloading so much information in this time that everything from all of your senses is triggered and activated. Okay? So it may be hard to identify triggers. So if you have a trigger like a caw from a crow, you may not know how to stop that because you can't stop a crow from cawing, right? So it's dealing with the root trauma that allows us to be able to deflect the triggers so that they don't lower our vibrations, okay? They don't send us back to the past. So the person that I was with that had no filter would trigger me often. And it came to the point where I did not want to change that other person because that's not fair. I took that on myself to learn how to transmute those triggers, to turn those triggers into shields so that every time I heard a specific word, it didn't cause pain. I'll give you another example. The tragedy of my second husband's death. Every time I heard the name, it triggered me. And immediately I was back in that moment. But now I do not hold that pain in my heart. Now when I hear his name, I have a mental image in my head, a video of him dancing around the living room with our daughter. The memory is no longer triggering pain. It raises my vibrations because it reminds me of that happy memory. I have turned this trigger into a way to raise my vibrations. This can be extremely difficult. Okay? I know this. I know this so very, very deeply. So, if you have a traumatic event in your past that is so painful that you cannot find a good link to create a higher vibration, I want you to focus on the healing from that traumatic event. I want you to focus on the moments when you were knockout, dragged down, like just so drained from all of the emotions, all of the pain flooding into you, but you got back up. I did a video already today about resilience. When we find a way to find a silver lining, we can turn a trigger from a lower vibrational energy to a higher vibrational energy. I'll give you an example. Okay, so I specifically spoke in the video about resilience, about finding my self-love. And I found my self-love in remembering how many times I have given love, regardless of how many times my heart was broken. I found something to be proud of myself for. This was my silver lining. When I hear something, smell something, see something, whatever, that reminds me of a particular incident, a particular person, a particular situation, I can return to this self-love and remind myself, I overcame that. I transmuted that energy into my personal power. And for that, I am now happy and proud of myself. So I hear the name, it triggers, oh, look at that. I'm doing so good. I'm doing so good right now. And I am no longer drugged down, but lifted. So when we are doing the shadow work, it is extremely important to understand that looking into the past is different than stepping into the past. I highly suggest grounding prior to doing reflection. Prior to reflection, ground your energy. Step outside of your emotions and analyze. You are watching a movie, you are not acting out the scene. Stand in yourself in the present moment and be an objective observer. Look for patterns. If you see patterns, for example, reactive, especially angry reactive, figure out why. What is the root of that programming? For example, let's say you were bullied a lot as a child, and this rooted into you anger. And every time someone says something that you perceive as criticism, that anger flares up. When you have that reactive anger, it's not because of the situation. It's because of the programming due to the root trauma. So going back to that root trauma, the bullying as a child, and transmuting the energy of no one understood me and everybody made fun of me into I was not like the others for a reason. They could not understand me because they didn't understand themselves. Now you have turned this I am not good and no one will ever understand me into compassion. Because just because they didn't understand you doesn't mean they understand themselves. If you understand yourself and you celebrate yourself, the criticism, if it's not constructive, can now just bounce off because now you have inside of your mind, they don't understand me because they don't understand themselves. This is how we turn shadow into light. This is the root of shadow work. Because once you have transmuted it into light, it is a protective shield that circles around you. And it blocks out the chaos, creating for you an eye of the storm. I honestly did not think about any of this, and this is turning out better than I could have possibly hoped for. Oh, I love it. Anywho, so going back to the transmuting of the triggers, okay? When we learn that people will trigger us, because not everybody knows your whole story, right? And we can't expect that everybody is going to be empathetic or caring or even have a filter. That's their life, that's their path. We have a choice. Do we become reactive, or do we transmute those triggers when they hit us? We don't have to do it in that moment, but you can store it up here and say, okay, that was a trigger for me. Let's examine it. Let's figure out why. When you know your triggers, they no longer trigger lower vibrations. You can transmute that to trigger it into a higher vibration. Okay? Now, I want to speak on intuition. Okay? This was something that I had a really hard time forgiving myself for. Not trusting myself, seeing the red flags and pushing it down as a trauma response. This was a lesson that I had to learn. I had to learn all of those red flags and what comes with those red flags in order to be able to understand my own intuition. So do not beat yourself up for seeing the red flags and walking right through them. This was your lesson. This was how you learned the red flags. Because just because you see a red flag doesn't mean you know what it means. Yes, we have to understand, is this a trauma response, or is this something that I should trust my intuition? That's why it was perfectly acceptable for you to walk through those red flags. Because anxiety, trauma, can be like a PSYOP operation, psychological operation, right? It could be like PSYOPs. It could be, and if you read The Body Keeps the Score, he speaks specifically about the amygdala and how the amygdala will send out alarm signals when things are safe because you're so used to that chaos. You're addicted to the response that you don't see safety as safe. And so the alarm signals will go off, and you have no idea when you're just stepping into understanding how to trust yourself. Is this anxiety or is this truth? You had to walk through those red flags. You had to be able to say, yeah, I know what that means. That's a red flag. You had to experience it in order to be able to say, yes, that's a red flag. No, that's anxiety. We have to be able to experience to gain the wisdom. So blaming oneself or shaming oneself for not seeing the red flags or seeing the red flags and walking right through them, this was your lesson. We changed that feeling of I should have known better to I was learning. We are not mad at a baby who cannot explain to us their needs because they do not know how to speak. Do not be mad at yourself for something you didn't understand because your brain was programmed by early childhood. You are programmed from the day you are born until the day you wake up. You are running on a default mode, something that you don't even consciously know is there. That's why we step out of the egoic mind and into the soul so we can better understand. That's what it means to be awake. It doesn't mean whatever nonsense. It means understanding that this is programming. This is default mode. I saw once on a meme or something, like if you are not awake, you are on the universe's default mode, and you don't want to be on the universe's default mode. This is absolutely true. We don't even know what is programming us. We don't. I was discussing with my friend this morning. If I look at the difference between teen movies now and teen movies when I was a kid, and even teen movies in the 80s, it's totally different. The message is totally different. Think about 10 Things I Hate About You. 10 Things I Hate About You, like you have two sisters, right? One that's following the crowd and cares about what other people think, and one that doesn't. One that goes and paves her own path, creates her own way forward. This one gets hurt. This one finds love. Authenticity. That's the message. Now, I don't even know what nonsense they're watching. I was in the room while my niece was watching something, and I was like, oh my gosh, the message of this is terrible. We don't even pay attention to what is being pumped into us by the distractions, by the music, by the people around us. We are downloading this information unconsciously. That is what it means to be asleep. When you awaken and you start to see the subliminal messaging, the undertone, the influence, this is when you have a choice. Some people take the path of fear, anger, reactivity. Others take the path of learning and rising. You have a choice. Everything is a choice. So when you are walking down the street and you hear that conversation and it triggers something inside of your mind, are you going to let it be an automatic negative thought, which is what they teach in psychology, in CBT, that everything is a trigger, which leads to 3 responses: emotional, physical, and behavioral. But they don't teach you about having automatic positive thoughts. Do you get triggered with an automatic negative thought or an automatic positive thought? The choice is yours. Start doing the shadow work. Start transmuting that trauma into a higher vibrational experience. That hurts to say. But my soul knows it's truth. Trauma is hard to overcome. Trauma is hard to find the positive. Trauma makes it hard to forgive and find compassion. But when you take that route, the outside influences can no longer hijack your energy. And I mean that seriously. The outside voices can no longer hijack your mood. Because you could be having an absolutely fabulous day. I was watching a video from a gentleman the other day. He was like, I left a high vibrational meeting and this guy was like being angry and immediately it caused fear. That's a frequency disruptor. Lowering your vibrations. When you take away that power by creating a high vibrational reaction, frequency disruptors can't do anything anymore. You have your own path. You are the master of your own path. You have a choice. Do the shadow work and turn the trauma into higher vibrational energy, or continue to live by the script, the default mode, the programming. I hope this helps. Have a great day, guys.